Our guest speaker, Chris Carmody, I'm saying that correctly?
Harmony, yep.
Harmony, thank you. From GrayRobinson, PA, he'll go ahead and share with us some additional insights about the 2021 legislative priorities. Just a little he already discussed about himself, but a little bit of additional background. He earned his certification as a designated professional lobbyist from the Florida Association of Professional Lobbyists and is an attorney admitted to the practice in all Florida state courts. He has substantial experience handling government relation matters, including representation before the Florida legislative and executive branches. Some additional areas of practice that he does is government affairs and lobbying, government election law, higher education, land use, litigation, restaurant, environmental, and environmental law, construction, and COVID-19 task force. Thank you for joining us, Chris. If you want to go ahead and get started, the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, I will try to share my screen here. I have a little Prezi. So I apologize in advance when you see all the tabs on my screen, but that's how it says it's disabled. Is Dan or Aaron or one of y'all able to enable share screen?
I think Ben should be able to take care of that. You got that, Ben?
Or Ben, sorry.
Ben's going by Rebecca today, according to his Zoom.
It's allowing me now, so we're good. And I'll go full screen. So again, you don't have to see all those giant tabs there. And I'll run through this quickly. Won't keep you guys, won't talk for a full hour here, but as I introduced myself, I do government relations. I started actually as a litigator in the construction litigation field. And so, I love those kind of topics in the legislative process. But at some point when I was Orange County Young Republican president, I was recruited into to help on the government relations side. Some of you are old enough to remember that there were Republicans in Orange County elected. It's not too long ago, but it feels like a long time ago. So I knew a lot of them then. They're all retired now, term limited. So good thing I got in when I got in. So we're going to talk a little bit about this session. So every legislative session, every single one is distinct in its own way. Not just because it's a year and the way Florida does it, it's a 60-day process, which started back on March 2nd, will end on April 30th, and the committee weeks led up to it. But they all have their own distinct feel, some more distinct than others. Obviously, the session when Parkland, the sad tragedy took place, it's all on its own, and it took up all the bandwidth for obvious reasons, especially when they did the gun reform legislation. Last year, towards the end, it kind of took on its own flavor because of COVID and what it did to the last week of session. This year, there is no question what the conversation is going to be. It's going to be COVID, and it's going to be the budget that's feeling the effects of this pandemic. And of course, there's some other things that will go on there. But with every session, you got to start with the budget. It's the one thing they're constitutionally required to pass. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and start talking about, well, looks like I got a little head there. There it is. So with the budget, okay, bud, working from home, it's a joy. They're projecting $2 to $3 billion a year-over-year shortfall. And so what you see on the screen, very austere budget to match the austere tax revenues. It's the largest net shortfall since the 2011 session, which was at the height of the Great Recession, where my partner and our managing partner, Dean Cannon, was the speaker. So that they're going through some things that they haven't gone through in a while, and that they rarely go through. And so there's going to be cuts. You've got Wilton Simpson, who has made it, the president said he's made it clear he's expecting some major cuts. He just announced yesterday he wants the federal dollars, which I'll talk about in a second, to only go towards one-time projects, because as you can see there, the federal dollars are not going to be recurring. So he doesn't want to put towards any kind of recurring line item without a guarantee of where we're going to be next year on our revenues. Now, all things being equal, we expect our revenues to be in a much better position next year, but there's no guarantee of that, right? Tourism is the big of the three-legged stool of Florida's economy, construction, agriculture, and tourism. Tourism is absolutely still struggling. And so until that leg of the stool is more firmly put back on, there's no guarantee of where our revenues are going to go. There's going to be cuts in education. There's going to be cuts in healthcare spending because those are recurring dollars. But make no mistake, there will be federal stabilization dollars that has been dominating the news last couple of weeks of the CARES 3 or whatever you want to call it, act coming out of DC. I think the House finally passed it, and it's going to be coming down now. Local governments that are CDBG certified are going to get direct allocations, which is great for our local governments. I think the state did a great job in allocating the original CARES Act dollars, but it was by no means efficient. So I'm both giving them compliments, but saying it's a pandemic and no one expects this. I also can criticize that it wasn't perfect. It is what it is. I think it'll help that you get these direct distributions to the cities and counties that are qualified. But the one thing on that $2 to $3 billion, when that revenue projection was put out, that was back in July. Amy Baker, the state economist, who every year, the joke in the lobby corps is every year, she's like the groundhog for like the budget, except she always sees her shadow. Every year she's predicting year over year shortfalls, and it hadn't happened. This year, she's 100% right that it was going to happen. That was easy to predict, but not to tune of $2 to $3 billion. In fact, every month since that prediction, the revenue projections for that particular month have actually been better than what they were projecting. So I am glad she was wrong because we're in a much better spot. We're not in the best spot by any means, but we're in a very good spot, so to speak, for Florida. The governor certainly deserves credit. The state has opened up and our economy's going. And I think just we all deserve credit, right? Everyone's kind of found a way to get this economy going because we care about our livelihoods. So that's the budget side. Now let's talk about that shortfall. Where's this revenue going to come from, right? So let's talk a little bit about revenue generators. Online sales tax enforcement. So some of you who are legal nerds like me probably remember there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision a few years ago called Wayfair. It was in North Dakota or South Dakota. See, I'm going to get that part wrong, where they had an online sales tax collection, and a company sued and said you couldn't do it. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can. They have enough nexus to the state. We are finally there where the state is going to collect this revenue. Now, I bet if I ask you to hold up your hand, you all remit a check to the state whenever you buy something on Etsy and they didn't charge you sales tax. You got your checkbook and you write it out and send it to the Department of Revenue, because of course you're all great Floridians and you follow the law. Okay, thank you. Let's be honest, no one does that, not even the legislators. The governor probably doesn't even do it. No one does it. And that's why it's $1.3 billion they're expecting in revenue if they enforce this. So this is finally got momentum. On Wednesday of this week, so this is good timing, both the president and the speaker announced that they're going to pass this legislation to enforce the online sales tax. But the catch is you started to hear this bubbling, is that they wanted something revenue neutral. I represent a lot of commercial real estate interests, so I was hoping for a business rent tax reduction because we're the only state, us in New York City, are the only ones that charge taxes on commercial leases. So we'll get there one day. But what they announced is most of that money, if not all of it, is going to go towards the unemployment tax to offset it, so that all of you employers or those of you who work with companies have to pay that. They won't have that big tax increase basically for the next couple of years to replenish the funds that have been depleted in the last 12 months. Basically, the language of the bill and the terms of that agreement is once that unemployment tax revenue kind of fund that they have reaches $4 billion, I think it's 4.06, I forget how they come up with the number, but it's just a little more than 4 billion. Once it hits that, then they can take this revenue that they've got from the online sales tax and either just let it go into general revenue or put it towards something else. So pay attention to that. That number is only going to increase. Everything is going more and more online. And so that 1.3 billion is just the beginning. Now, here's the interesting thing. You see, it says 900 million for state revenue. Where's the rest of that go? That is actually local. That discretionary sales surtax that is collected in most counties. Now, some of that will now be collected on this internet sales tax. So a lot of counties, especially large counties here in Central Florida, are going to have kind of a boon there. They're probably going to, some it'll be in the 20 to 30 million that they'll get in new revenue. Some much less, but that's new revenue that will go to the general revenue fund that these counties can use on their infrastructure based on that sales tax. And it's pretty broad uses in there. So there's some opportunities for Seminole County if and when this passes, because I don't see the legislators taking that money away. But I mentioned this as new revenue. The way I just structured that deal, that online sales tax enforcement is not going to at all help with that $2 to $3 billion shortfall, because you just heard me say they're going to offset it with the unemployment tax increases. So it's great. It's a good thing that they're doing this. It'll create parity for commercial real estate industries, right? Because now they don't have to compete with the online retailers that don't pay tax. but not going to help our revenue shortfall. So let's talk about the Seminole Gaming Compact. It is our understanding they are very, very close to upgrading the Seminole Gaming Compacts. For those of you who follow, 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I'm going to mess up the years, the Seminoles stopped paying to the state what they owed on the gaming compact. That's because the state was found by federal court to have been violating the gaming compact by allowing some of the pari-mutuel facilities to have blackjack through like an electronic. They had like a fake player. I don't go to the pari-mutuel, so I don't know. I don't go to Hard Rock all that often either. So I don't know how they were doing it, but they were violating it. And the Seminoles were paying in good faith for a couple of years, hoping the state would fix it. They never did. They said, we're going to stop paying. So that was $300 million they stopped paying in, which would be nice right now, given our circumstances. So they've been having negotiations for the last couple of years. And what they would include are new games. So think craps, think roulette. Also, they would have renewed exclusivity. They would probably get another facility. It'd most likely be down in the Miami area. And then they would allow, the big one is sports betting. And it would be very New Jersey style, where it would be, as long as you're geo-cached, as they call it, in the state, you can bet on your phone through the Seminole Hard Rock Casino, which I'm pretty excited about. They say this could generate up to $700 million in recurring revenue. And that's kind of baseline, right? Sports betting, most people believe sports betting is one of those things that it's the tip of the iceberg that will just continue to generate revenues for the state, assuming they legalize it. So pay attention to that. That could be a new way to generate our economy a bit, and also another way to generate revenue. And I know they're seriously looking at it. I will tell you this, if you see the bill introduced, so at some point they'll introduce it this session, that is probably the signal that it's going to pass, because everyone's that's in the mix on this have told me that they're not going to introduce it unless the deal's basically done. So pay attention to that one. All right, education. I heard some folks here with charter schools, so I'll go through this quickly and we can get into questions later. No, I would say the budget is required for them to pass every year constitutionally. There might as well be a constitutional requirement that the multiple education bills will be filed, because 160 legislators, 120 in the House, 40 in the Senate, and of course, governor that cares. Education is sort of the other bill or bills that have to be filed because people care about it. So this is going to be another year of school choice. The first one is the one that's moving, Senate Bill 48, expansion of scholarship programs. Basically, it creates some scholarships and then combines some scholarships to the McKay-Gardner. It combines all those scholarships that you've heard about, a lot of them within school choice, and then the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program. That one is already ready for the Senate floor. Senate Bill 52 and House Bill 281, dual enrollment scholarship program for private and homeschool students. Expansion of virtual learning, no surprise there. We've got a situation where virtual learning just exploded in the last year because of the pandemic. You've got Senate Bill 1228 by Senator Diaz, requires school districts to offer live remote operations for all public schools. And then 1468 and 1031, which would authorize virtual charter school to provide part-time instruction. And then also provide part-time instruction via charter school or public school rather than school district. And then you got expansion of school choice issues, where you've got Senate Bill 1028 and HB 51 that would authorize state universities and colleges to sponsor charter schools. And another one that I didn't get a chance to put on the slide, but it's also interesting. I don't know if it's going to move, but you probably heard about some of these. They've got these new pods where there's technology companies, it's like Uber for school pods. It provides the technology that allows, if you're stay-at-home mom or dad that's helping educate your kid, you can grab 3 or 4 others that are doing it. And then there's all this instructional support on the back end. And they usually do this through charter schools. It's kind of a win-win. The charter schools are able to get more students this way, but they don't need to necessarily have the infrastructure to take them on, because it's being done through someone's home office or what have you. But they provide the back end. There's groups like Prenda that does that they've got a program here in Central Florida, and they're starting to do it in Miami and others. So pay attention to these. Many of them will make it to the finish line, much to the chagrin of the teachers union. A lot of these school choice bills are not popular in that group, but they are going to be moving forward. Priority of the governor, and certainly priority of the House and Senate. Like I said, COVID-19 is going to dominate this discussion, this session. So here's a couple things that are going that are either directly related or kind of tangentially related to COVID-19. So civil liability for damages related to COVID-19. The House bill passed last week. The Senate bill is near passage by Senator Brandis. Senator Brandis was kind of the brainchild early on in both chambers of pushing for this. And he got a lot of counsel. And so no surprise, he's the sponsor of both the regular, and I say regular, and then the healthcare one. That they couldn't come up with a deal pre-session to do all entities, so they decided to separate out healthcare entities. Now there's a push to put the bills together. I think, as Brandis said, it'd be easier to defend one fortress as opposed to two. And here's what he means by defend is, so these bills, and by the way, the healthcare one is being primed to pass, I would say, next week in the House and likely next week in the Senate, if they don't combine them. Here's why he talks about defending. This bill, it would, and you probably all know this, so I'll go through this quickly, but it would basically make nonprofits, businesses, local governments immune from lawsuits for COVID-19 damages, so long as they were no worse than negligent. And negligent on what, right? What duty did they owe? Is that follow the CDC guidelines, follow the governor's executive orders. If they were no worse than negligent in doing so, the bar to sue them is pretty high. They would have to accomplish that. There's like 6 things they have to sign off on, including have a doctor that certifies with an affidavit that they 100% got COVID-19 from this particular institution, which that's probably the hardest bar, because that's just with contact tracing. Chances are, I have been living a bit of an isolated life because we have a 6-year-old who keeps interrupting, but he's got bad lungs from being a preemie, so we're trying to protect him. But most folks, and God bless you, are kind of trying to live this sort of normal life the best you can. So you probably come into more contact than just the restaurant you went to or just the government building you went to. Now, here's the deal. It's retroactive in intent. And that's a big deal. Under Florida Supreme Court, whether it's a conservative court that we have now or a more liberal court that we had probably a couple of years ago, retroactivity is hard. And why is that? It's because if you have a substantive right, the courts have always, they have been unfavorable to any kind of law that tries to yank away that substantive right, right? So that means, if Ben had a right to sue on COVID-19 because he got it from something, and now this law, and he hasn't filed it yet, because the big key about these laws is if it applies to anything that has not been filed. So if he files it tomorrow, he's fine, because these bills are not going to get done by tomorrow. But if he hasn't filed it yet and the law gets signed, he's now lost his ability to sue. Doesn't matter all the damages he had, doesn't matter if he's still got issues with COVID, he can't sue anymore. And some would argue that's a substantive right that was yanked away from him by this bill. The legislature is going the route that it's remedial. So there's 2 standards for retroactivity if it's going to pass constitutional muster. It has to be clear that it was meant to be retroactive. Both these bills do that very clearly. There's particular sections that say this is intended to be retroactive in intent. That's covered. Second part is it can't be substantive, can only be remedial. You have to be remedying something. There's a lot of whereas clauses in both these bills that try to make clear that this is a unplanned for, unpossibly able to deal with in the moment event, that there was no right owed to anyone to provide any protection against until the CDC guidelines came out. So all we're doing is remedying this and saying there was no right owed, and therefore because there was no right owed, we are going to take away any would-be rights to sue unless these people were worse than negligent, right? Because there wasn't a duty to be, you can't be grossly negligent. You can't be like intentionally, giving people COVID. Obviously, that's a tort. But as long as you're no worse than negligent to a duty that the legislature is suggesting wasn't even owed, you're fine. I think the Supreme Court will support that, but I will be honest, it's kind of a coin flip, right? They're just usually very hard pressed to take away someone's substantive rights. But it's going to have to be a really good case, right? It's going to have to be someone that clearly got it from a location, and it was clearly it was negligent, but they could have been better about doing it, where they knew they owed a duty. And I don't know what that is. Maybe that's like a restaurant where they kind of understood they had a closed environment. I don't know. But the trial bar is absolutely going to challenge these laws. And so I think Brandis is right. One law would be easier to protect against than 2. So sovereign immunity, I bring this up, sort of the trade-off with this is like, okay, businesses, we're going to give you all this protection from COVID-19, and okay, cities, we're going to give you this protection. The trade-off is quietly, you're hearing more about raising the sovereign immunity caps. If you don't live in local government, you probably have never dealt with this unless you've had to sue them. But basically, whether it's Seminole or your cities, if you sue them in tort, sovereign immunity usually protects them up to a certain amount. And basically, it's the cities and the counties. It's $200,000 for a claim. If there's multiple claims, within an incident, it's up to 300,000. Anything above that, you need a claim bill at the legislative level. Those are hard to do, claim bills. There's long been a push to increase the caps. And this year there's bills, there's a Senate bill as well by Diaz that would raise it 500,000 for a single incident, up to $1 million if there's multiple incidents within a claim. That is a big jump because cities and counties get sued a lot more than you probably think because, you know, a garbage truck hits someone or hits something. You know, a police officer, you know, accidentally runs someone over when they're in pursuit. These bad things happen, unfortunately, and they can be sued. So this will raise the costs for cities and counties a lot. And so they're very nervous about this. I can report now, I think this bill is not going to make it this session. I think that trade-off of, hey, we're going to give you liability, kind of immunity on COVID-19 for this, I don't think that's going to happen. There's enough legislators in the House and Senate that are kind of wary of changing the sovereign immunity statutes, but I put it on your radar because it's like a ticking time bomb. It's going to keep ticking and eventually it's going to go off. We'll just see where it goes. Combating public disorder, I'll end with this. It's not pandemic, but you can't talk about the year that was with this pandemic without talking about the Black Lives Matters movement, especially as it kind of really took the national stage in the summer after the tragic death of George Floyd. This legislation had been cooking all summer. You remember President Trump and Governor DeSantis said law and order, and the governor said he wanted a special session on an anti-riot piece of legislation. If you know the legislature, you know they never go into special session except for the budget. After the Pulse nightclub, no special session. After terrible hurricanes and this and that, no special session. I always say if Parkland happened a day after session, they would have not come back, which is, it sounds crass to say, but they just wouldn't have. The legislature rarely ever goes into a special session. So I say this is, they were never going to get that special session. So this bill cooked all throughout the fall, all throughout election season, as the governor said he wanted it. And then on January 6th, where other unfortunate events took place in our nation's capital, they rolled out this bill. I don't think the timing was on accident. Once they saw what was happening, this bill was already ready. They said, yep, now it's time to file. I'll tell you what it does real quickly if you haven't gotten in the weeds, and I'll tell you where I think it's going to go. It increases the penalties for 18 crimes if they're committed in the course of a riot. Think assault, the penalty, I think it's 3rd-degree misdemeanor. It now might jump to, or a 1st-degree misdemeanor might jump to 3rd-degree felony, right, up the ladder. Can you tell I haven't gone to jail? I don't know how it all works yet, and I'm not a former criminal attorney. And it also creates 3 new crimes, right? It's cyber harassment, it's other types of harassment in and around a riot or a protest. And then also, interestingly enough, Florida didn't have crystal clear laws on demolishing memorials. We had defacing, right? Like if you spray paint something, but not if you just like, kind of like what you saw in some states where you just take down the statue and throw it in the river. So they upgraded that. Here's where it gets interesting for local governments and law enforcement. If a city was to reduce the budget of their law enforcement by even $1, now a citizen would have a private right of appeal to the governor's office to say, I think that was wrong. That's interesting because right now we're okay, but depending on the federal stimulus, the cities and counties are probably going to have a tough year next year, especially if you had a lot of commercial properties in your ad valorem. Those, I promise you, on January 1 of this year, those did not appraise high. So the ad valorem collection is going to be low, and they may have to say, you know, we're going to drop the police budget and every budget by X%. If this bill was to pass, that would be problematic for them. So pay attention to that. Also, interestingly, if a city has been deemed to have undermined law enforcement's ability to quell a riot, if a protest got out of line, they would lose their sovereign immunity. So that's an interesting thing. And so at least with any incidents that took place within that riot, so that's something that's got the cities upset. And another one that's kind of a nuanced thing is, you know, we hear a lot about the right to defend in our statutes, right? That stand your ground. Stand your ground gets a little messy in a riot. And it's basically the way the language is, it says there's an affirmative defense that if you were injured, if you're suing someone from being injured in a riot, the affirmative defense on the other side is kind of like a stand your ground claim, is it was a riot and stuff was going to happen, which is interesting. Basically saying you can't sue in tort if someone does something really terrible to you if you were involved in a riot. This bill, I'm going to go ahead and not shock you by saying this is highly controversial. No matter even if you agree with some of it, it's rubbed some people the wrong way. on all sides of the aisle. I talked to some folks didn't think about this, but the First Amendment is what has got everyone concerned, right? Is that this could quell a lot of First Amendment rights. And so, you know, the conservatives say, oh, that's just the liberal media talking. I've had folks from the Catholic Conference call me for some insight on this bill because they're worried about when they do abortion clinic protests, right? Some of those get pretty heated, not violent, but they get pretty heated. And they're worried the way some of this language is drafted that they wouldn't be able to do those protests anymore for fear of, you know, what if someone just gets really heated with a doctor walking? I mean, look, I'm not defending one way or the other, people yelling at each other. I always say, let's all get along and argue peacefully. But my point is all sides of this issue are now all sides, conservative, liberal, are coming in and having concerns with this. So here's where it's at. It is going to pass the House. It's moving through the House on party line votes. The Senate has yet to move. Now, the Senate's not terribly liberal. It's pretty conservative. It's probably its most conservative it's been in years. Here's what's interesting. The chair of the first committee reference is Senator Pizzo out of South Florida, a Democrat. He is one of the few Democratic chairs in the Senate. And his committee, I want to say it's criminal justice, is the first committee of reference. He hasn't heard it. And I don't think he's going to hear this bill unless it changes dramatically in some form or fashion. So pay attention to that. Yeah, horse trading is going to certainly occur on this. We'll find out how important it is to the governor, how important it is to the House, and maybe how important it is to the Senate president, because right now you have a chairman sitting on this bill, which that's stock standard Senate, right? In the House, chairmen aren't going to sit on bills, right? The speaker's going to say, you need to move this bill, and it's going to get moved. In the Senate, chairmen are usually left to do, and chairwomen are usually left to do whatever they want, right? Rarely does the Senate president say, you have to do this. They just don't do that. So it'll be very interesting to see where this bill goes forward with, we're now day 50 or whatever in session, or day 10, 50 days left. It's got to go through 3 more committees and then still get it through the Senate floor before it even goes to the House side. So it'll be interesting to see where this one ends up. Spent a lot of time on that. We'll jump real quickly in environment, and then we'll talk about a few seminal issues. And I'd love to answer any questions. Environment, it's kind of like education now. It's become like there's absolutely going to be bills. I, as a Republican, I'm very proud of this new Republican wave on environmental issues. It's you know, Florida is just a wonderful, beautiful state, and we can't take it for granted. Not to mention, people need to drink water, and you got to protect water supply, and we're starting to burn through it. So one thing is continuing to deliver on the governor's promise about $2 billion towards water quality funding. I fully expect the House and Senate to come through on that particular ask with $625 million again this year. Tightening regulations on water, wastewater utilities. Some of this is controversial. You're seeing stuff. I'll talk a little bit later. There's a bill in the Senate regarding the Central Florida Water Initiative. That's a DEP rule ratification. That's controversial. But these regulations are pain points, right? Florida, the way Florida has grown through development is, while we care about water, we don't care a lot about water, and now we're starting to care about water. So it's and the environment as a whole. So it's making some of these, whether it's biosolids conversations or just in general surface water district, maybe some of these conversations difficult as we go forward. The cost of development, whether you like it or not, is going to go up in Florida, especially in parts like our area of the state and certainly South Florida, because water's becoming more and more scarce. Resiliency efforts. You probably saw in the governor's budget, he wanted $1 billion for resiliency over the year. You're starting to hear a new mantra in the Republican Party. While they don't necessarily acknowledge how climate change occurred, they are acknowledging climate change is occurring. And given the way our state is positioned along the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, and the way our state kind of goes below sea level as you get closer down to the Keys, it is a reality, unless something changes, you know, from an environmental perspective, that we're going to have continued flooding problems in South Florida over the next couple of decades, and it's going to get worse and worse. So you're now seeing Republicans to sort of acknowledge that. And House Speaker Sprowls actually put out a proposal 2 weeks ago saying that he's going to commit to getting $100 million out of his side of the budget towards resiliency efforts. So my guess is that is the top line. I don't think the governor is going to get $1 billion unless he just, he could get it over 4 years, but I think that's about all he's going to get this year because it is a tight budget year and they're just not sure what they're going to do with some of this. But pay attention to this. It's a refreshing site. The devil's in the details, right? It's great. It's on paper, it's great to be pro-environment, but the way our economy grows, I mentioned construction, agriculture, and tourism. Well, 2 of those legs on the stool use up a lot of water and has been known to cause a lot of damage to our environment, construction and agriculture. You could maybe even argue tourism. I mean, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, just in general, growth is you can't have growth and also have perfect environment. Like you have to balance it. And I think we all get that, but that's what the challenge is facing Florida going forward is how do we manage this growth, but yet also kind of protect this beautiful thing that we have. So pay attention to that. Seminole County, I won't get too much in the weeds, but you have a lot of appropriations in play. Seminole State, your schools, all your cities have some projects. The dirty little secret in the process is that if you're, especially on the House side, if your appropriation was more than 500,000, it got a lot of scrutiny. If it was less than 500,000, you were probably in good shape. And that was sort of an unofficial House rule. I would say there will be appropriations over 500,000 that get funded, but it's going to depend on the match and what have you, especially in education. Like you can't do a Seminole school project or a Seminole State project without spending more than a couple million, because these are big capital projects. But pay attention to that. There's some legislation out there to do a study on the Little Kaiba River. And then I pointed out 7062. This was filed earlier this week. It's regarding the Central Florida Water Initiative. So this has been going on since 2015, but more recently, DEP sped up efforts to get their rulemaking done. On March 1, the day before session, I want to say something like 18 municipalities, county or municipalities, sued DEP over this rule, which I thought maybe was going to slow down this bill, but the bill is still coming out. It doesn't have a House companion yet, so that'll be interesting politics, whether the House can drum up support to get one out of committee. But here's the thing. This is that kind of cliff we've been headed towards. And I don't envy Jason Broders, our prestigious chair, president of the chamber, also chair of this committee. His committee is running this bill. And I think Jason is probably in a tough spot where he's very supportive of these cities and counties and moving forward with developments. But also at some point, we're going to have to bite the bullet on what we do with our water quality and water issues and consumptive use. So pay attention to this piece of legislation. It's a ratification of a rule. It is not without its controversy. If it ratifies, the good news is it'll probably improve consumptive use and other issues related to water in our area. The bad news is there's some concerns it may raise water bills in the short term. And it's also going to have some tough effects on development for a lot of these cities and counties. Like I said, I don't envy the position the Chair Broders in, because it's both something that needs to be done, but doesn't need to be done this year. I don't know that they'll sort that stuff out, but I put on your radar because it will 100% the CFWI is going to affect Seminole County all the way down to Osceola County, and certainly Polk County, who's probably the most affected by this. So pay attention to that. You'll probably hear some of your cities and counties talking about that more as session starts to go on. With that, I would love to answer any questions. There's my wonderful mug. Glamour shots are a wonderful thing. And I can do whatever you need on that. Otherwise, Aaron, I can just turn it back to y'all to handle your business today.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, we'll go over that right now.
I have a question. Chris, and you touched on a little bit about the new gaming pack and sports betting. There are 3 pari-mutuel licenses in Seminole County. 2 of those licenses are held by one of our members, and they have been watching very closely on sports betting. Is that going to be exclusive to just the tribe, or is that going to be something that's going to be shared, or is there going to be some sort of at least value sharing amongst the holders? Because I know a lot of businesses are holding on to their mutual licenses, especially with the shutdown of a lot of the racing, and that's kind of the last bastion for job creation and economic growth to those areas.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and, as we're reporting this, full disclosure, the Seminole tribe is a client of the firm. We don't do their lobbying work, but we handle a lot of legal work for them, which I don't deal with it all, so I don't have any knowledge of any of that. And I also know we represent some pari-mutuels across the state. Again, not anything I deal with specifically, but I read the news and I follow legislation. But your question's very on point and fair, Ben. Is every gaming compact and every gambling deal this is like Groundhog Day, the Bill Murray version, where I feel like we see it every year. There's always a gaming compact bill that comes out, or a gaming piece of legislation, and it dies within a week. They pass it in both chambers, it goes to conference, and we all get spun up because we all got some group that we represent that it cares about it, and then it just dies. The fun ones was it Oliva and Galvano. They would have these very Galvano wanted to have private conversations, and Oliva would say, nope, we're going to talk about everything in front of everyone else. And Galvano's like, I don't want to do that. So those fun theater, not fun ending results. I tell you all that, and the pari-mutuels are probably the monkey wrench every year in this, right? And I say it in a positive way. They have a stake in this, and they've been providing jobs in this state, all across our state, and they need to be respected in this process. There's no doubt the Seminole Tribe is the 800-pound gorilla, probably 8,000-pound gorilla. If you read it, I think they're the most profitable casino in the world, not just in America, in the world. So and the money they're sending to the state, that $300 million that we used to get, and maybe the $750 if this gets done, that is no joke. That is real money that will not just provide projects, but give us stabilization and everything across the line. But the pari-mutuels have a stake. They have kind of property rights in that stake and what they have in these licenses. And so that's going to be the real monkey wrench. How do they take care of them? Maybe the way to do it is to give them access to the sports betting or a share. As someone who is a casual gambler, and I say casual, like Robert Stewart, my teammate, will make gambling bets on golf tournaments and that between each other, or Gator football, which just breaks my heart every year. But the competition would be a good thing, right? You'd want these pari-mutuels or some other entity at the table. Not that it's like a bet is a bet, but there's people like going to Caesar's Palace as opposed to this place in Vegas. I mean, people have their preferences. It would probably create some competition in the market and make it creative. I don't know how you accomplish that, meaning I just don't know what the process is to get all that done. But I think that's probably in play, because I think if the deal does nothing for the pari-mutuels other than let them die on the vine, I think they've got lobbyists like everyone else, and they will make their voice heard, and they will flex. And every time they flexed, I feel like they've been able to kill anything that's happened. So it's a good question, because that's the big question mark out there, right? And I don't know, I'm not part of those conversations. I do enough to make sure I'm in the know on this. We have enough clients that aren't in the direct gaming space, but would be affecting if something happened with gaming. And so we obviously make sure we get all as many details as we can. But the folks who are in the room, like I said earlier, not to use the Hamilton reference, but in the room where it happens, they're telling me that if something gets put out there and for consumption, that is more likely than not the deal, because they don't want to go through those start and stops they've done every session before. And because it's just not fun for anyone, right? It's good theater for a good day, and it writes a lot of stories, but it doesn't accomplish anything and distracts from other things they need to get done in the process. So I think if it pops, I mean, nothing's a guarantee, but if it pops, you see the legislation come out of committee, my guess is that means something's either done or 99% done. So great question.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Sherry over in DeBarry. Septic to sewer. That is, we're a city with a budget of $20 million, and at a minimum, it's going to cost our residents $15 million to convert up to $40 million. So is there anything coming up that could help us? I know there are grants, and we'll obviously be applying for those. But again, the actual hookup is $4,000 to $6,000 per resident, and that's in our poorest district.
Did you say DeBarry, Sherry, or
DeBarry,
yeah,
City of DeBarry.
That rhymes with your name.
Yes.
So the two things. Yes, there was funding last year in the budget for septic to sewer. And so here's a funny thing. It kind of started to come out when the governor put forward his $2 billion plus for the environment, and he got a quarter of that. He said he wanted it over 4 years. He got a quarter of that first session. It was kind of widely believed that there weren't enough projects for DEP to put this money towards. And so they were looking for opportunities to spend this money, because they weren't used to having 600 plus million just dropped in their lap for projects. And last year they had the funds, and this year, one thing we learned is that there's a lot for septic and sewer, but we've been encouraging our city clients and county clients to, even if they don't think it's a good shot to get funded, to put the project forward anyways. Because what we've noticed is DEP is looking at projects that are getting vetted through the legislature, not necessarily making it to the finish line. And those are good candidates for these funds, where they're not even making them necessarily go through the grant process, because they're getting 20 to 30 million for septic to sewer. Then they're going through the project list in the House and Senate going, well, who had a septic to sewer project and didn't get funded? And I had that happen for at least 2 clients. And that's why we started doing it, because we heard about it one year. And like anything, you hear about it and you go and explore and go, oh, that turned out to be true. I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to do more of that. And so I remember telling the client when we didn't necessarily get to the finish line on that particular project, stay focused on it, keep all the data ready. We're going to make some calls. And sure enough, within a month or 2 after the budget was signed and we're into this fiscal year, DEP came calling and said, hey, are you still looking to do that project? We could fund 60% of it if you could come up with some of the other funds. So they're looking for opportunities to do this, Sherry. And I would encourage, I admit, I don't know if DeBerry has a lobbyist or who their lobbyist is, but work with them to, I would put some projects just in the budget, right? And to get them vetted, and then work on that relationship with DEP, because there is funding in the budget every year now. And I would guarantee it's going to happen next year as the governor's going into his re-election year. They're going to let him deliver on that promise of $2 billion plus the environment. Get this stuff in play, because there's a lot of money for septic and sewer. Because here's the sad thing about septic and sewer, right? It's 40 million, I think, got funded last year. That would not even fix all of Seminole County's septic to sewer, right? It wouldn't even come close. And so this is going to take a while, right? I represent a city down in South Florida that when they were developed back in the 1950s, it's almost all septic. And it was just, and so they've slowly but surely started to claw that back, especially because they're near a river down there. But it's expensive to do these conversions or even upgrades. Now, the other thing about Sherry, and I'll stop, I'm talking a lot on this. Can you tell I've dealt with this issue? One of the issues with septic is DOH was the one who would sign off on all the septic conversion. Department of Health makes sense on paper, right? Like this is a health issue, right? But it's also an environmental issue, and it's become more environmental than health these days, as we're not necessarily concerned with the health side of the septic anymore. We're concerned about what is that doing to environment with the seepage and such. Right. And so last year there was legislation that took away a lot of the authority from DOH on approval of some of these septic conversion / upgrades. Because here's the problem: is technology in the upgrade space, as you may be familiar, is doing really well, right? I mean, we're living in a technology age. Why wouldn't septic technology be getting better? So there's some really cool products out there to upgrade these septic systems. But DOH was being very slow to approve these. At least I say that, I don't have personal knowledge. That's how it's certainly been presented to me. And that seems to be the general belief up there. And so they took away some of that authority to bring it over to DEP. So again, some of these more cost affordable type projects that also are better technology could get approved, and thus that a conversion, or more appropriately an upgrade, because conversion is not always possible, an upgrade could be done cheaper and quicker. Everyone wins, right? Because it's Florida. You don't have to go very far to find a spring shed. And so that means basically every county in the state that has septic probably has some seepage into a spring shed. And we need to be careful about that. So they're working on it, Sherry, probably not as fast as they could. But I think as the years have gone by, as governors push for environmental help, septic sewers become more and more of a priority, because I think they're starting to realize like that is, they need to really address that if they really are committed to helping our environment and our water quality.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, we're in the Gemini Springs BMAP. So luckily we have a good state senator who's there working for us. So thank you.
You do, and you've got the best person I know in the world, our founding partner, Charlie Gray, living up in that area. So you got good company.
That. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. Thank you. Just saw him the other night. Thank you.
You got it.
This is Alicia. Thank you for your fabulous information. I just had a question. I don't know if there was a buzz up there regarding data breaches and merchant accountability. You know, that's something that kind of impacts our space in when credit cards are compromised for our members, and you know, the merchants never held accountable. So I don't know if there's a talk of that.
I've heard a little talk on that, but I think probably related is the consumer information, which I'm sure you have a lot of. What company doesn't these days have a lot of consumer information? And what happens with breaches? That legislation is very volatile. It's already having Republicans peel off of it, and it's, again, we all get it. There's this general belief, and they're probably not wrong, that the Facebooks of the world and certainly Twitter are affecting the narratives, and they're using our consumer information both for and against us, right? And so one argument is they're a private company. They can do whatever they want. And if you don't like it, get off the platform, right? Okay. The other argument is they've become so big. It's, hence why they talk about with Facebook, Google, and some of these others that they might have to break them up like they did AT&T back in the early 80s. They're so big, they're a monopoly at this point. And therefore, you don't have the choice to be off the platform, right? If you want to be relevant in any kind of industry, you almost have to be on social media. And so that is what's driving the discussion, Alicia, and folks like y'all are going to get swept in. Any folks that deal with a lot of consumer information or trading consumer information, right? Like think of timeshare. Florida's got a lot of timeshare companies based here, and all they do is trade in consumer information, right? Like they're lead data driven, or taking their current customers and trying to turn that into new product. So it has a lot of unintended consequences. I assume unintended. So I think that legislation that's going to deal with that is probably going to die under its own weight, unless they fix it and make it leaner and maybe just apply to a Facebook or just apply to a Twitter, where I don't think anyone has any hard feeling. Okay, punish Mark Zuckerberg. He can lose a couple billion, but yeah. it's everyone else that's going to get affected. But no, I haven't heard a ton on that data breach. Okay. Now, would your question be more in like, are they going to put penalties on y'all? Like you said, like y'all get the brunt of it and the complaints, right? Like, is if right, you ask
like, the Wawas of the world, the Walmarts, the skimmers. So then we, for reputation purposes, usually the member, will think that it's us who are not have the capability to keep your data safe, when in reality is the merchant that you visited who compromised your information.
I'll check on that and see if I hear anything bubbling. I haven't heard too much on that, but you're right. I mean, there's a reason I haven't had to replace my credit card this year, because I've only had to go to a gas station like 6 times. I joke, probably more than that. But I mean, I can almost notice it. I kid you not. During legislative session, when I would be traveling a lot more frequently to Tallahassee, and I had to stop in the middle of I-75, without fail, I would have to change my credit card at least once, because I know I hit a skimmer, and within 3 days, someone was charging $700 on my account in Idaho. But yeah, I don't know that. I will look into that. I haven't heard anything. If there is legislation filed, that means it's probably not moving yet, because we would have seen it. But I'll get you some answers on that, Alicia.
Thank you. No, and we're also doing it federally, so. Okay. I just wanted to see if there was a conversation up there. So
which is probably Chris. Because of Commerce Act and everything else. Yeah. Federal legislation might make the most sense on that. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, sir.
You got it.
Okay. If anybody else has any questions, now's the time, or we'll go ahead and wrap up. I think we're good. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. It was very informative, and it was a pleasure having you. Ben, if you just want to wrap up with any chamber announcements.
Pretty quiet. All your guys' priorities were passed through our board of directors, so it's great. On a personal note, today is Jessica's last day, so we're saying goodbye to her today here in the office, and we're moving right along. Chris, thank you very much. It was very, very nice and informative. This is being recorded, so we're gonna, put it up on our YouTube so people can watch it afterwards. So we're very excited about this whole presentation.
I'll find out if I said something stupid. Then someone will see. I'll probably hear from Jason. He'll be like, "Why did you say that?" Like, and I'm like, "What?" No, guys. I want to thank you guys for inviting me. Deb now serves on the chamber board with y'all, and I love serving with y'all for many years. We GrayRobinson are proud to be a part of this chamber. So appreciate you giving me a chance to come meet with y'all today.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for your time and participation. Our future meetings will be Friday, April 9th and Friday, May 14th, and we can go ahead and adjourn at 9:26.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Chris.